Suddenly, a mounted policeman charged toward me, and I ran out of the square. Everywhere, I could hear the sound of glass being smashed and gunshots. A night watchman had shot someone he thought was trying to break into his store. I figured I'd find Terrence at the Socialist Party headquarters, but when I got there, there was a crowd of men standing around, throwing things through the window while the police stood by and watched. I saw this young woman. She was the same woman who had earlier pinned the red rosette on me, arguing with the police. "You've got to stop them. They're drunk." "Move along, sister. There's nothing we can do." "Just a moment," I said. "These men are destroying private property." "Oh, so you believe in private property now, do you?" was the policeman's reply. Just at that moment, I heard a window smash, and I felt something hit my forehead. I put my hand up to my forehead, and it was wet. At first, I thought I was sweating, but when I looked at my hand, it was covered in blood. The woman sat me down on the curb. "It's just a little cut," she said, "but it bleeds a lot." She went inside the Socialist Party headquarters and found a rag, dipped it into some water, and applied it to my head. It was a little piece of glass. I was able to get it out, but I can't stop the bleeding. "I've got to get you to a doctor." "I'm fine," I said. "Leave me alone." "You're not fine. You can't stop the bleeding." I couldn't see anything out of my left eye, but I heard voices talking over me. Dr. Davies, this man, the bleeding, I can't stop the bleeding. You've got to help me." The doctor came over and examined my head. "Looks like you're going to need a stitch. Get me my bag. Will you, Rose?" So her name was Rose, I thought. The doctor came over to me and he said, "Well, this is going to hurt a bit." And he put a stitch into my wound without an anesthetic as I held on to Rose's hand. "You're very lucky. Any closer, and you would have lost that eye." After he cleaned up my wound, he went on to attend to the wounds of people far greater than mine. Just that moment, Terrence showed up. His glasses were smashed out of the frames, and the frames were crooked. I've never forgotten that sight. You know, years later, when I saw the Russian movie, Potemkin, you know the scene where the Cossack is swinging his sword at the bespectacled student? I always thought of Terrence. "Kosaki!" yelled the man in Russian. "Kosaki!" "Terrence, what happened?" "I don't want to talk about it." "But, do you hear me? I don't want to talk about it. Where were you when the fighting started?" "Well, where were you?" He tried to get those policemen to stop those men from smashing the windows of the party headquarters. "I see you've met my fiancée." Yes. So you're Terrence's fiancée." My heart dropped into my stomach and my knees felt like I was about to give a speech in elocution class. "Well, I'm very sorry we didn't meet under better circumstances, Miss Rose Krasnow." "I'm not going back right here to Sandusky. Can you get back on your own?" I fished around in my pocket for some spare change. I had my notebook, and I had the Bible. They both left me to go off to bail out those people who had been arrested. The casualty count for that day were 2 dead, over 200 injured, and 140 arrested, most of them foreign-born, according to the New York Times. Ruthenberg, the socialist candidate for mayor, was arrested in charge of attempted murder. He was later released on $1,000 bail. Scores of red banners illuminated the night sky as an angry mob set them ablaze in the square. The next day, I caught the train to Sandusky. I was worried that my mother would be concerned about my wound, scold me for getting my clothes dirty. When I arrived at the house, she was in tears. "It's only a stitch," I told her. "Oh, Jimmy, you don't know, do you?" And she pointed to the table there. The telegram. "The War Department regrets to inform you that your son, Stephen Michael Higgins, has died of influenza." "Where's Dad?" "He's at the newspaper office." "Does he know?" "Yes." "And he went to the newspaper office?" I ran out of the house and down the street to the office of the Standard. And I walked inside, and there was my father, sitting at his desk, putting together the next day's edition of the paper. He was crying. I've never seen my father cry before, and I've never seen him cry since. "Well, glad to see you're safely back from Cleveland." "Dad, I know about Stephen. Did you get your story?" "Yes." "Dad, why don't you go home? I think I can finish up." "Very well, then. We'll print it." My father walked over to the coat rack, grabbed his coat, his hat. He went to the door, then he turned to me and he said, "But be sure you check your copy before you set the type."